Check, check, check. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings of peace, blessings upon you all. Alhamdulillah. Yes, it's wonderful to be here. Coffee is one of my favorite things. And so is poetry, so coffee and poetry together. And Rumi is one of my favorite human beings and one of my great inspirations. So I'm going to get into a little bit of commentary on some Rumi poetry and read some of his excerpts and then kind of unpack them, because as Rumi becomes more popular, I don't know about here, but I know in America, he's the #1 selling poet. People love Rumi. But as things get more popular, people tend to understand them less. That's just the nature of it, of things, right? It's like you want the best coffee, it's small batches, right? You start to boost productivity and you lose some quality. So inshallah, we'll try to get at some of the root, the essence of the essence. Before I do that though, I wanted to start with a piece of my own. It's a dua, and it's a kind of a communal piece, because I need everyone to say Ameen. So inshallah, we start all together like that, and then we can dive into the ocean of love, inshallah. So I'm sure someone has a pure heart. So if everyone says Ameen, hopefully it'll be answered. There's someone in here that it will be answered, inshallah. May your day be filled with love and light. Ameen. May your wrongs be right. Ameen. May your songs be tight. Ameen. May your words give sight. Ameen. May your nur shine bright. Ameen. May you always be on the righteous side of the fight. Ameen. May your lovers be loyal. May your soil be fertile. Ameen. May your khakis stay creased. May your locks stay oiled. Ameen. May your plans never get foiled. May your plot thicken. Ameen. May your chicken be halal. Ameen. May your style be sufficient. Ameen. May your soul be free of its prison. Ameen. May Allah increase you in your vision. Ameen. May you find everything you've been missing. May you awake for prayer before the sun has risen. Ameen. When you speak, may your audience listen. Ameen. May you never feel trapped in the system. Ameen. May you sire many righteous children who will act on prophetic tradition. Ameen. May you always have food on your plate. May you learn from every mistake. May you rise above all the hate. And may Allah increase you in your state. May you never pretend that you are what you ain't. May your friends be real and never be fake. May your rent never have to be late. And may your health always be great. May Allah forgive every sin, now and forever if you falter again. And may you always stay close with your kin. And may He make all your enemies friends. May He make reality of your plans. May your present be pleasant. May you have a good end. May your heart be purified of its flaws. And may you act according to the laws that were revealed in the book of Allah. And may He catch you whenever you fall. May the One guide you to the truth. When you doubt, may He show you the proof. May you be like the Ahl Suf, with the wisdom of the elders, the energy of the youth. May He accept your prayers and your fasts, the very first all the way to the last, and remove obstacles that you have. And may you receive everything that you ask. May you never have regret for your past, and receive mercy, not the wrath. And as you travel down your personal path, may you always have a reason to laugh. Ameen. Give yourself a round of applause. Yeah, everything that is worth doing is worth beginning with a prayer. And it's an added bonus if that prayer is also a poem. So alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala sayyid al-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'een. We're all gathered here to dive into the ocean of love. And we're taking Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi as our guide. And he's a great guide into the ocean of love. And the hope is that we can come back from the depths to the surface with some pearls. You know, they say about the poets that the poets are the ones that dive deep inside and bring things up to the surface from the seafloor so that other people can witness them. Because not everyone is skilled divers, but the poets, they have that ability. Mawlana Jalaluddin Rumi lived about 800 years ago, and he's buried in Konya, but he was born in Balkh, which is Afghanistan actually, nowadays. And he was from a scholarly family. He was a religious scholar, and he was a scholar of Sharia, of the sacred law, Hanafi Faqih. And he lived a fairly normal life of a scholar at the time, giving lectures, teaching students, commenting on books, things like that. But at some point in his life, it was to take a radical turn. And that was when he met Shams Tabriz, Shamsuddin Tabriz. Shams is an Arabic word that means the sun. And Shams was kind of a wandering dervish, and he's a colorful character, shall we say. There's a lot of stories about him, and he tended to upset a lot of people. And there's many stories about how he met Rumi, but one is that Rumi was sitting by a river or a pond and was teaching one of these great books to all his disciples, and had a huge book. And you know, in those days it was meticulously copied by hand, so it would take months just to write out one book. And here comes Shams, and he grabs the book out of Rumi's hand and he throws it in the river. And all the students are outraged. And he just says to Rumi, when are you going to start living it and stop talking about it? And the students, how could you insult our teacher like that? But Rumi said, no, he's right. So they have this profound love, and it's as if Shams really sparks something in Rumi, gives him a fatih, gives him an opening, and completes him in his spiritual training. And after some time together, he ignited something, because Rumi wasn't a poet before that, actually. And so he made him into this poet. And after some time, Shams disappears. And Rumi, heart-stricken, right, longing for his beloved, in the deep state of sadness, he starts to compose lines of poetry. In fact, they say that he started to whirl around the place where they would gather his students. There was a pillar in the middle, and he grabbed it with one hand and whirled in agony and started just reciting words. And these his students took down, and this became the Diwan Shams Tabriz, which is one of his major books of poetry, which is the collection of Shams Tabriz. He named it after Shams. And these, since I came up in hip-hop, these were his freestyles, right? We have in hip-hop, there's freestyles where it's just improv, right? Inspired by jazz. It's just off the top, as they say. You're not thinking about it. It's whatever's on your heart, speak. And then there's your written rhymes, right? Those are what you sit meticulously write. So Rumi had his book of freestyles, the Diwan Shams Tabriz, but he also had his written rhymes, and that was called the Masnavi. And this is considered kind of his magnum opus, the Masnavi. And it's a epic poem. It's actually in rhyming couplets. It's longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. And it's thousands and thousands of stories about the spiritual path. And in the introductions, he says this is the root of the root of the root of religion. In other words, he's saying, I'm going to get to the heart of the matter. And it's often called a kind of a mystical commentary on the Quran, getting to the heart. And Rumi is relating all these stories back to the human state. So he's saying, when you hear about the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, when you read that in the Quran, don't think of this man in the past, but think of the Pharaoh inside of you. Right? Or he says, when you hear the story about Jesus, right, understand that, right, in the Quran, Ruh Allah, Jesus is like a spirit from God. Understand that you have a spirit from God. You have a Jesus inside of you, if you would only connect with it. But he said, but you also have a donkey inside of you. And that's what's dominant with most people. And so he often uses these kind of comical things, but they get at the heart of the matter. He said, in fact, Jesus was once, riding his donkey. And he said Jesus was drunk on God, right? This ecstatic relationship he had with the divine. He said, and at the exact same time, his donkey was drunk on barley. And so he's saying, look, everyone in the world that you meet, they're drunk on something. But just elevate your intoxicants, in other words. Choose a higher intoxicant. So all these thousands of stories, but he begins with an interesting first story. And I always reflected on, why did he choose this story? And this is the story of the reed flute, the ney. It's very famous. So he says, listen. It's the first word. Listen to the sound of the reed, right? The reed flute, as it tells a tale, complaining of its separation, like crying of its separation. Anything that's been severed from its origin, from its homeland, yearns for the moment of return. And he goes on. But what Rumi is saying, and in the gatherings of remembrance that him and his disciples would have, they would beat the drum and they would play the reed flute. And Rumi is saying, the reed flute, like everything else in the cosmos, it is speaking to you. It is telling you something if you only had ears to listen. And as we know, the reed flute, it starts off as a reed growing in the riverbed, and then it's cut, and it's taken away, and it's carved into, and then it's brought to the gathering, and it's given breath, and then it comes to life again. So like all the stories in the Masnavi, all the stories Rumi tells, that it's not just about a reed flute, obviously. You probably gathered that much. But that we are the reed flutes, the human beings. And that we are from a different place. So just like the reed flute, when you hear it, it's one of those instruments, for those who have heard it, you know that it's incredibly beautiful. But at the same time, it's incredibly sad. Right? There's other instruments like that. For me, the violin is like that. It has this ability to, like, you hear it, and it's beautiful, you're drawn in, but at the same time, you start to, like, miss something. You're not even sure what it is. It was like 5 minutes ago, I was just fine, and then I heard that, and now I'm all emotional. I feel like I'm missing something, I'm not even sure what it is. But Rumi's saying that reed flute, that cry that it has, right, is its cry to return back to the riverbed where it's from. And that, like the reed flute, we all come from another realm, so to speak. That our spirit, our soul, is from the riverbed, if you will. And this riverbed is, in Quranic terms, the plane of Alastu bi Rabbikum, right? The plane in which all our spirits were in the divine presence, in the river of love and completion and witnessing and harmony, complete harmony, knowing no lack whatsoever. And in the Quranic narrative, Allah says, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Rabb? And the Rabb is a powerful word that means Lord, Master, one who brings to fruition, one who takes through the stages of development to completion. It means all those things. And we all souls, the children of Adam said, Bala shahidna. Right? Yes, we bear witness. And we said shahidna, which is nahnu in Arabic. It's the plural meaning we were aware of each other as well. Shahidna, we understood that we were part of a collectivity. Then we were taken out of that realm, and we had the spirit blown into this body of clay, right? Nafas ar-Rahman, the breath of the All-Merciful blown into Adam. And when that breath is blown, the spirit is blown into this clay body, this physical form, and we enter the world of form and separation and opposites. We begin immediately to play the song of yearning for return. Huh? So listen to how a baby enters the world crying like a reed flute. Huh? And what Rumi is getting at is that every single person, no matter how off-key their song might be, they're ultimately playing their song of design for that completion. And some people play it out by trying to lose themselves, transcend themselves, find completion in, on the stock market or in the boardroom. Some people do it on Friday and Saturday night in the pub or in the club, right? Trying to find that moment of transcendence where they lose themselves. They're not even aware of themselves. Others find it in entertainment or sports where they can just get lost in that moment for a second. And some in love and some in other ways. But at the core of it, it's the same yearning to transcend our own limited selfhood and connect with the source of existence, which is really where we're from, the riverbed. So, listen to the sound of the reed as it tells a tale. And one of the reasons why Rumi speaks to people and is the #1 selling poet. I mean, imagine that. Someone who wrote in the Persian language over 800 years ago, and that the words he said still having relevance to people in the bosom of, modern Western capitalism. You know what I mean? It's amazing, right? But the reality is that it's because he's tapping into this universal reality of being a human being on earth. And one of the things about Rumi that people love is that he's not talking about some overly intellectual relationship with the divine. It's very much heart-centered. And so, in fact, he even says, I went into the place where the scholars were talking about the beloved, right? This is how he refers to God, the beloved. And they were talking about the beloved, right? Think of the theologians, and they're describing it very rationally and logically. And he said, they were saying, it's as if they were saying, the beloved has eyes that are this far apart, and a mole on the cheek like this, and very unpassionate, just kind of matter of fact. And he said, but that's not how a lover talks about the beloved. If you've seen the beloved, you wouldn't talk about the beloved like that, right? How does a lover talk about the beloved? Her eyes are like full moon, and her teeth like pearls, right? It's this inspiration. So he said, too many people have got trapped in the head, basically, and have stopped living that direct connection in the heart. And that the path really is inward. It's not outside of you. And that all the stories in the sacred tradition, they're about what's inside of you. Right? So, one of my favorite stories in the Masnavi, Rumi tells the story of the ferryman. And he says, there was a ferryman who used to take people across the river. And a great sheikh, right, a scholar of the outward, he came to go across the river. And this sheikh was known as a very learned person, but unfortunately he hadn't realized his knowledge. His knowledge had only kind of puffed him up more, made him more arrogant. And so he started talking to the ferryman. He said, "Will you take me across?" He said, "Sure." And so they arranged a price, and they departed. So as they were talking, the sheikh found that the ferryman had very poor speech, poor grammar. He couldn't compose a proper sentence. And so he said, "What is it with you? Didn't you learn to speak? Didn't you go to school?" And the ferryman said, "No, actually I dropped out. Very young, I had to work as a ferryman to feed my family. I didn't really learn these type of things." And the sheikh said, "Then you've wasted half your life." So they continued on, got to about the center of the river, and the boat began to sink. And the ferryman looks down and sees the water fill up. He looks up at the sheikh, and he looks down at the boat with the water, and he looks back up at him and he says, "Did you ever learn to swim?" And the sheikh became upset. He said, "Swim? I'm an important scholar. I had all these important books. I don't have time for child's play and these games like swimming." He said, "Then you've wasted all your life." And the point, and there's many lessons that can be drawn, but the key lesson that Rumi's getting at is that it's not about being caught up here in all these books. Really, the path is just a little bit of knowledge, but it's a lot of actualization. It's a lot of practice. It's a lot of realization, right? And the world is a river in which countless souls drown. And the books are to help you swim through the river to the other side, safely, And that's really what Rumi's getting at. So the reed flute allegory is one of the most powerful allegories or analogies because it gets at a deeper reality of the human being. And there's a few other lines that I wanted to recite from Rumi before I get into another allegory that he used and that the Prophet Muhammad also used. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Rumi has lines like, "If you could get rid of yourself just once, the secret of secrets would open to you. The face of the unknown, hidden behind the universe, would appear on the mirror of your perception." Right? And we hear, right, people like Ibn Ata'illah, these great sayings of the great saints that said it's actually better for you to commit a wrong, commit a sin that humbles you, than to do a righteous act that fills you with pride. And so it's this self, right, seeing yourself, that is really the great veil. And ultimately, the great idol is the self. And the self is the mother of idols because it creates all the external idols. Yeah? And, so many people are following their internal idols. Maulana talks about the garden, the orchard. He says, "Come to the orchard in spring. There is light and wine and sweethearts in the pomegranate flowers. If you do not come, these do not matter. If you do come, these do not matter." So, the garden, in a sense, is internal. And the reed flute is a great analogy, but there's one that's more perfect. And that is the dream. So, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, man is sleeping, and when he dies, he wakes up. And he also said, die before you die. In other words, wake up before you wake up. And in some sense, the mystics, the Sufis like Rumi, they're the impatient ones. They don't want to wait till they die to wake up. They want to wake up in the dream. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also said in the hadith of Jibreel, when Gabriel came in the form of a man and asked him, what is Islam, what is Iman, what is Ihsan? For Islam and Iman, he gave kind of point by point answers. But when he said, what is Ihsan, which means excellence or beauty? The Prophet said, it is to worship Allah as if you see Him. And if you don't see Him, know that He sees you. Which is, right, beautiful. It's also like, how do you do that though? Right, the other ones is very point by point. This one is like, okay, how do we do that? And so if you were to poetically rephrase that in light of the other hadith that we mentioned before, you could say, live this dream as if you are awake. And if you are not awake, know that the awake is watching you dream. So there you have it. Welcome to the dream. Here we are. And many spiritual traditions, if not the vast majority, have used similar allegory of dreaming. That this world is like a dream. And we're all sleeping in it. But that there is a way to wake up. And that there are people, prophets and saints and sages that do wake up. And if you would, for a second, do a short exercise. If everyone would just close their eyes and do this visualization exercise with me. So imagine that you are in a beautiful garden. And this garden is full of all type of blossoming flowers of every color. And it's a warm summer day, but there's a nice cool breeze. And this breeze is carrying all types of scents from the flowers. And you hear the buzzing of the bees and the chirping of the birds. And it couldn't be more perfect. And because it's so tranquil and so peaceful, you sit totally at ease beneath a tree. And there you are with your beloved. And again, because it's so peaceful, you are totally relaxed and you become sleepy. And you lay your head in your beloved's lap and you start to doze off. And as you enter sleep, you start to dream. And you start to see people and go places and you visit. And you have all types of experiences, some of them beautiful, some of them frightening, some of them just confusing. And very soon, like we all do every night, you forget about the place that you fell asleep. And the dream becomes all that you know and all that you remember. And ever so often, as the beloved is watching you sleep and looking into your face, knowing that there is wisdom, there's a wisdom in sleep, and sleep is necessary, in fact. And knowing that when you're ready, you'll wake up. But out of mercy, the beloved, when he sees you perhaps caught in a dream or caught in a nightmare, or caught even in an illusory pleasure that must fade, sometimes blows those sweet nafahat, those sweet breezes, or maybe runs a flower under your nose so that you catch a glimpse, catch a whiff of the place that you came from. And then in those moments you have a kind of opening or an epiphany or a feeling that there's something beyond this. And this isn't all there is. And I remember something I'm not quite sure even how to put into words. And then perhaps you fall deeper into sleep, or perhaps you start to, over time, become more awake. And the reality that the Prophet ﷺ and Rumi after him was getting at is that this is the reality of the human being. Is that we are here in this dream world, and that there's a wisdom in it, though we may not understand it, but that there's a way to awaken, and there are people that have awakened. And so live this dream as if you are awake, and if you are not awake, know the awake is watching you dream. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for indulging me with that. So I spoke earlier today to a group of children. We have different terms for it. It was like middle school. I forget what you guys call it here.
Second grade.
Right. And it was an all-girls school, and they were very brilliant. But I remembered when I told them a story of when I was their age. It's funny how, I don't know about you, but there's whole years of school where I don't remember anything that I learned. Not a single thing. And in 7th grade, which is when I was probably, 13 or something, I remember one single thing. Okay, I remember maybe 2 or 3. But the one that stands out is the day that our teacher told us the allegory of the cave from Plato. If anyone remembers that. And I don't know why in my hormone-fueled 13-year-old head that somehow pierced me, but I had like an aha moment, like an epiphany when I heard that. And basically the summary of the story is that in this allegory there's people, and they've lived their entire life, born and raised in this cave. And they're seated and they're chained, and they can't even move their heads, their necks are chained, yoked. And all they can do is look at the back wall of this cave. And so what they see is just shadows. And because that's all they've known, that's all anyone around them has ever known, they assume that's the world. That's everything. It's just the shadows. It never even occurred to their mind that there may be something else. Now, in the allegory, all of a sudden, one of them finds himself free of his chains, free of his yoke. He can move his head left and right. He can stand up, and he looks around the cave. And he's, in a sense, liberated from that limited perspective. And he sees at the other end of the cave a source of light, right? And so naturally he starts to go toward it. And as he gets toward it, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, until all of a sudden he steps into the light. And it's so bright that he's actually blinded and he can't see, and he's totally confused, and he's not even sure which way is up or down. And then his eyes adjust, and he realizes he's just stepped out of the mouth of the cave. And he sees a world infinitely more vast and infinitely more beautiful. And the colors and the trees and the sights and the sounds and the ocean. And shocked, he starts to explore. And after some exploring, he, like most people, I know myself, he wants to what? Return to his people and tell them the good news. Look what I've discovered. And so he runs back to the cave and he tries to tell his people, there's a world out there. It's way beyond the shadows. It's way more vast and beautiful and amazing. And he tries to describe it. But his people, they have no reference for anything he's talking about. All they know is the shadows. And so they just look at him perplexed. Like, what is he talking about? And at first it's just confusion. But very soon, because he's so insistent, and because what he's saying is undermining everything they've taken to be reality, they turn on him and they start to hate him. he becomes perceived as an actual threat to them, and they reject him. And something in my 13-year-old head, I said, that's it. That's real. We're in the cave. I know it's true. And there's a way out. And what's amazing is, this story is 3,000 years old or something. But that this is the story we see repeated in the Quran. That the prophets, right? These were people that, through divine grace, they got out of the cave. They saw what reality was really about. They went into the light. And they came back to tell their people. Right? And the great saints and sages and prophets of human history, they've all had essentially the same message, that this cave is not all there is. The shadows are just the interplay of light and darkness, but they have some relation to the light, but there's something beyond them. And just like the Quran talks about time and time again, what happens? The people reject them. The people try to stone them or chase them out or try to assassinate them. And this is the nature of the human condition. And, nowadays modern man, we're very literalistic. We don't necessarily like stories and poetry, because stories and poetry, they involve a lot of symbolism, right? You have to have a certain type of symbolist mind to be able to see them, right? And now, if we want to degrade something, what do we say? Oh, that's just a myth, right? But mythos, in its original sense, is that a myth is something that points to an order of reality beyond sense perception. Something that you can't just speak about with language by the limitations of language and the five senses, but it holds the keys to unlock secrets about a higher reality. And, this is one of the beautiful things that Rumi and the great poets do, is that they start to unlock, they give us those keys to unlock the door. But Rumi has insisted that the path is not actually through your mind, it's through your heart. The mind is good and important, and it has its role to play. But you have to submit your understanding, and you have to feel with your heart. So he says, intelligence is like swimming in the seas. The swimmer is not by it saved. He is always drowned at the end of the affair. Leave off swimming. Let pride and disputation go. This is not merely the Oxus or a lesser river. It is an ocean. And moreover, it is the oceanic depths without shore. It engulfs the seven seas like straw. Love is a ship for the elect. Seldom is calamity the result. It is the vessel of deliverance. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. Your intelligence is mere opinion, while bewilderment is immediate vision. Sacrifice your understanding in the presence of Mustafa. Say, Hasbi Allah, for God sufficeth me. So it's about the heart. And one of the most common analogies that Rumi uses, he's known for what? The wine. Talking about the wine. And it's amazing because in America, people, they love Rumi, right? It's all about wine and love, right? So they're just drinking their glass of wine with their loved one and reading Rumi. But he's getting at something deeper, right? He's using these symbols to unlock the keys. And ultimately, he's saying, look, everything you love, everything your heart inclines to, whether it's a person or a beautiful rose or a beautiful sunset or a beautiful picture on the wall, whatever it may be, what you really love is the creator of that thing. The divine beloved who has put a trace, a shadow, shall we say, in that thing of the one. And so what you love is ultimately, if the veil were to be lifted, you love that one. And the wine, of course, Rumi did something interesting, and a lot of the Muslim poets, they took the stories of Jahiliyyah, actually, so the pre-Islamic poems, and they saw that they were actually full of imagery. So the great kind of love story in the English language is Romeo and Juliet, right? The great love story in the Islamic world is Majnun and Layla. Layla Majnun, right? And it's a beautiful story. It has many variations, but actually it was a pre-Islamic story. It had roots in that, in the pre-Islamic period. But most of you probably know it, but the idea is that there was a young man and a young woman, and they fell madly in love. But of course, like star-crossed lovers, it wasn't to be. And the father of the woman wouldn't marry her to him, married her off to someone else. And so, in his yearning, this young man, his name was Qais, he became like a madman, totally insane in his love, knowing no bounds, knowing nothing. And he became Majnun, which means the madman, right? And Majnun is from jinn, actually, it's related, so it's like the possessed one. Majnun. And there's many stories about what that he was following a mangy dog through the city and just weeping as he follows this dog, and people are like, "What are you doing, Majnun? You crazy. Why are you following this dog?" And he said, "Once I saw this dog following Layla." Right? Which is that girl's name. And then he said, they saw him kissing a wall over and over again, just kissing this wall. And they're like, "What is this crazy man doing?" And he said, "Once I saw Layla walk by this wall." Huh? And so the great mystical poets, they heard that and they say, Majnun is more of a lover than us. We claim to love God, but why are we just sitting here? We're not actually inflamed with love. So Majnun became this great hero of mystical divine love. And they saw the symbolism in the fact that Layla, in Arabic, it means night. And the night is that which envelops, right? It unites all. And then in the day, it's multiplicity. You see all the forms, but the night, all is united in the one, in darkness. And so Layla became this image of the divine, the one that envelops all things. And also, in the pre-Islamic period, there was all these poems about wine, right? And basically partying. I mean, you hear what's on the radio, right? The bartender and in the club. It was like that, right? These type of poems. But the mystics, they saw that these also had symbolic value. And so they developed this whole repertoire that the wine is when you have an opening, an experience of the divine, right? Whether in prayer or fasting, where the veil is lifted and you have a deep, profound, overwhelming sense of the divine presence. And the one who is pouring is God. And we all have a cup, and that is our heart. And they say, far be it from the bartender, if you will, to be stingy. No, the bartender is always pouring. So why then are not all people always in ecstasy and getting openings and divine unveilings? It's because our cups aren't prepared for what's being poured. So the idea is what? I must prepare my cup for all that you pour. And so some cups, they're not even at the bar, they're somewhere else. So how are they going to get filled? You have to be at the bar. Ya Allah, right? And some cups, they're flipped over. There's pouring, but it's not going in because it's flipped over because they're so focused on the world, right? They're just focused on this lower world. And some, they're up and they're at the bar, but they're filled with all this grime and filth and all this other liquid, right? Those are the kind of sins, you could say, tarnish the heart. right? And so the path is about polishing, right? Polishing the mirror, another great image of the path. Polishing the heart, cleaning the cup so that it can be open. No. Mawlana Rumi says, all people have to cross this path. Some with joy, some with tears. Better that you do it on your feet than to be dragged after death when you have no choice. So this life is the purification. And one of my teachers, he told me something that always stuck with me. He said, if you think about in Arabic, the words that they have a ring to them, like they have a similar sound, right? Nur, light, and nar, fire. Nur and nar. And he said, the reality is that the deen, the path, it's about purifying and burning off those impurities, right? What does the light do? It burns off the impurities so that you become more light-filled, more reflective of the light. He said that those who don't do that work and who are bogged down by darkness, that when they experience nur, they experience it as nar, that it's actually burning. So in the next life, those that experience nur as nar, if they haven't purified themselves, right? And so, as Rumi is saying all people have to cross this path. In other words, all people have to do this work. You're going to have to get rid of your selfish ego sometime. But some with joy and some with tears. And it's better that you do it on your feet than to be dragged after death when you have no choice. And so Rumi is one of these people who, what made Rumi? Rumi was the pain that he felt when he lost his master. And what's so beautiful about Rumi is that he is this person who is constantly giving us hope. The world is a place where people can get caught in despair, and sometimes you read the news and you look around and it's hard to remain positive, right? Right? Yeah. But Rumi says, come, whoever you are. Ours is not the caravan of despair. Even if you've broken your vows 1,000 times, ours is not the caravan of despair. In other words, for those who have felt the breezes of Ar-Rahman, the All-Merciful, they know that this is all in a divine wisdom. And that though we don't understand it here, we're not called to understand it here. We're just called to trust in it here. And that actually, right, perhaps you love a thing but it's bad for you, or perhaps you hate a thing and it's good for you. That Rumi has all these lines about how suffering is actually, with the right perspective, it is the key to awakening. Because, we all know, right? When you're having a good dream and you wake up, you're like, oh man, can I just go back to sleep? Come on, please, please, please. Right? But when you're not having a good dream, when you're having a bad dream, and you wake up, you're like, yes, it's not real. Yes. I didn't just, right? My ship didn't just sink. I didn't just punch that policeman in the face and have to run from him. I woke up, yes, it's not real. I'm not going to jail. Alhamdulillah. Right? So often it's in the difficult times where we are less enamored with the dream, huh? When it's actually this dream isn't fun so much, right? And many people that take the path, who take the deen of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, such as myself, most of them, they actually are, it's through a type of trial, hardship. Because if everything's going great, you're not going to seek something more, right? And Rumi says, the wound is the place where the light enters. Huh? So many lines like that. He says, if you're irritated, if the stone is irritated at every rub, how will it ever become polished? Right? This is the work. This is the work. And it's amazing because when I think of it, it really warms my heart that Rumi, his great opening, he became a poet. He became this world ambassador of love who people across the world, are drawn to. It was actually through his pain of losing his teacher. That's what made him Rumi. That's what made him the poet. So it was all that beauty came from pain. And, they talk about that Shams knew that I've taught Rumi everything I can teach him, and that the final lesson, his final awakening, will only happen when I leave. And he feels that separation. So sometimes when we're deprived of things that we get it. So I think I've spoken a lot, but one thing I will say is that, Rumi is seen as this kind of a universal mystic, right? Love, kind of bohemian hippie. And, there's a reality to that. But Rumi's path, as much as it's about love, it's also about discipline, right? And in fact, to be in the order, the Masnavi, his order, his tariqa, traditionally, before joining, you had to serve in the kitchen as a servant for 2 whole years before you could actually join. And it's this idea that you can't bring your cup to the bar until you've cleaned your cup. You got to do some work on yourself. And then when you've done that work on yourself and you've humbled yourself, then the opening comes very quick. And Rumi also said something which I love. So in addition to, if you were going to take the path, this order, the Mevlevis, in addition to following the sacred law, there were some additional things you had to do. And one of them was you had to swear off arguments, disputation. That if you're going to take this path, you can no longer argue with anyone about anything. And I love that because I'm not saying I love to argue, but I like to debate sometimes, right? When I was younger especially. And the worst place to debate, you all probably know this already, is on Facebook or anywhere on the internet at all. Never do it. It's a bad idea. Nothing good ever comes from it. I learned that by experience. And what I find is, because I would like to debate and I'll come with all my points and this and that, and this and then that, and I think this, and let me show you the proof here. And the irony of it is, even when I felt like I won the debate, whatever that means, for days on end I would feel a type of uneasiness, a tension in my chest, And then I realized, I remembered the poet's line that said, only when the sand has settled can you see the waters through. And it's something like it stirs up the ego, really, is this sense of self, right? We have that story of Sayyidina Ali, right? That he was doing battle and someone spit in his face and then he put his sword down and said, I can no longer fight you. He said, what do you mean? He said, well, before I was going to kill you, I was fighting you strictly for the sake of a higher purpose, but then when you spit in my face, my own ego became involved and I was going to kill you for myself because I was mad at you. And he said, I can't do that. And so it's getting at the same idea that when our ego gets involved, this kind of happens. Mevlana says, I'll close with this line. He says, speaking in the divine voice, he says, your call, O God, Ya Allah, is my call, I am near. Your supplication is my message. And all your striving to come close is a sign that I draw you to me. Your loving quest and pain are signs of my grace. In each, Ya Allah, I reply 100 times, here is my face. Alhamdulillah. Thank you.